welcome to TST Broadcasting and the Resort Management Marketing Channel. This is Shep Altshuler, president of TBMA and publisher of Timesharing Today. Today, Jeff Weir, correspondent for Timesharing Today and Red Week, and I will be discussing some key topics that were covered at the recent TBMA conference in Tucson, Arizona. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for joining us today.
Shep, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
We recently had the TBMA conference, and you were actively participating in that. And I just want to go over some of the takeaways from that meeting, get your perspective. I'll provide my perspective on some of the key issues that we saw happening at that event. And maybe I'll start with you. Tell us, what your thoughts are on an issue that you saw as being relevant, coming away from the meeting.
Well, they called this conference the Road Ahead, and it was very aptly named because its department, its audience is all legacy boards throughout the country. And I think all of them face a very difficult road ahead unless they start planning how to get there. And some of the things I saw at the TBMA session that were very compelling, we had some case studies of how HOAs have dealt with adversity, both economics and also dealing with just the wind down of a resort or the threat of a potential takeover from a third party. We also heard a bunch of experts who were consultants for the industry with vacation clubs, exchange clubs, legal firms, trust companies, title companies, and they all made a contribution of alerting the audience that the planning is essential to the survivability. And the number one takeaway that I took from that event was an awareness that if you've got a 30-year-old resort and you're not building adequate reserves for renovations and you don't have a good email list of your owners and know how to contact them, you're probably in a precarious situation looking down the road another 10 years. So if I was asked one thing by HOA members, I would say you have to do a sustainability study on whether your resort is even going to exist in 5 or 10 years. And if the answer is yes, then you have a clear picture of where it's going to be, and then you have to figure out the very many financial and management steps to get there.
What I felt right at the beginning of the meeting, there was this session on the case studies that you mentioned before, and I felt that I'm looking at the industry and the group in terms of where the road lies ahead, and there are what I see as positive outcomes and negative outcomes. And the case studies that you presented were, from my perspective, positive outcomes. We both have reported on the Tahoe Beach and Ski Club and the Plaza Resort in Reno, Nevada. And those, to me, represented positive outcomes because of the way the boards were addressing their current situations and trying to take their resorts in a positive direction. So just give a brief capsule of what really transpired with the Tahoe Beach and Ski Club in Lake Tahoe, because it's a situation that we both have covered, but let's just recap that and why that's a positive outcome.
I'd be happy to do it. The Tahoe Beach and Ski Club is a nice little 35-year-old resort in Lake Tahoe on the waterfront, with many legacy owners who use it religiously all summer and own, 10 or 12 weeks. But like many legacy resorts, they've been losing owners over the years to delinquencies and age. And as a result of that, there's been a vacuum of resale activity and sort of a minimal rental activity. And because of that, it opened the door for outside parties to come in and buy up HOA-owned units that were going to foreclosure or tax auctions. And it turned out several years ago, Diamond Resorts, which is one of the biggest ones in the country, started buying up as many units at Tahoe Beach and Ski Club as they could. And somewhere along the line, like 3 years ago, the legacy board owners got nervous about what it would mean if Diamond ended up controlling the resort. And it started a long legal battle that is still going on between the legacy resort board members and Diamond Resorts. And it's a standoff in court at the moment because even though they've had mediation sessions in their litigation, there's no resolution to it. But in the meantime, what has happened is that there's been a couple of HOA elections where the legacy board owners rallied as many owners as possible to vote. And in 2015, they were able to elect one more of their own to the board. And this year, they elected two more of their own. So today, the Legacy HOA at Tahoe Beach and Ski has 5 Legacy board owners and no Diamond representatives on it, and they have successfully defeated Diamond management folks who wanted to get on the board. Now, this is a successful outcome for the Legacy Week owners, but they still face the reality that Diamond owns 22% of their intervals, which is, equivalent to more than $1 million a year in maintenance fees. So the HOA is nervous about Diamond, independent at the same time. And they're also concerned about future block purchases that Diamond might engineer just because of the availability of Tahoe Beach and Ski units on the open market. To their credit, the board, in addition to sort of rallying the owners to protect their independence, they also have worked with a new management company. They've started a rental program. They've started a resale program. And as of the end of September, they sold over 100 HOA-owned units this year compared to none the year before. So their economics are getting better. They've had a consistent, a slight management and maintenance fee increase year to year, so they've built reserves. They've also spent about $13 million on renovations, and so they're doing their best by their legacy owners, but they do face this ongoing issue of either vacation clubs or outside entities that have bigger resources gobbling up potential units and then potentially changing the flavor of the resort if they can get control of the board. So that's one example of what can happen with a very energized HOA board, but in all honesty, that is a not common situation.
So we have a resort that's on at least stable ground, and they have a good foundation. They're in better shape financially, and they're in much more control over their destiny, and that's really what makes this a positive outcome. Now, on the other side of the coin, we have the Plaza Resort Club that was originally a hotel. The developer of that more than 30 years ago saw the potential of that particular property could be better served by marketing itself or repurposing itself from a hotel to a timeshare. And now realities have set in where they're facing the increase of dying owners or a decreasing membership base, and they recognize that they needed to do something, and they're in the process of repurposing the property again back to a hotel. So I'm looking at that as a proactive board that saw the reality of it, and they're moving to transition back to a hotel. Why do you see that as a positive outcome?
Well, it's a tricky issue because it's probably one that will be more common than uncommon for other resorts. And for folks that haven't looked at the Plaza Resort Club to see what happened, it's an object and abject lesson at the same time. If you start with the premise that the resort sold a lot of units in the 1980s and tried to keep up its interior renovations and things like that, it sort of worked pretty well, but over the last few years, their delinquencies have soared, owners have dropped out, and if they have 6,000 owners, they might have had 1,000 delinquencies, at the same time. So in the last couple of years, the board recognized they were just going to run out of money by the end of this year. The board president, Dick Drexler, spent many months trying to find some solutions. He did not find them. Ultimately, he did discover an investor group in the Reno area that wanted to try the repurposing of the timeshare back into a hotel. So they agreed, and this is a fairly stunning development, one of several. The investor group agreed to put up $1.6 million to subsidize the operation of the resort through this year and to pay approximately $600,000 of that 1.6 in cleaning up thousands of titles that right now are so murky that they cannot be sold with title insurance. So Dick Drexler was lucky to find that group, and to his credit, he found them. Then they also had to talk to their owner group and say, what should we do? And Dick came up with what I consider an ingenious plan of working with other timeshare groups in the area. And the timeshare plan is this. They came up with an offer to owners that said, you can deed back your timeshare to us and walk away because we're running out of money. Or you can exchange your timeshare for a similar timeshare at one of 4 other timeshare resorts located relatively nearby. And Tahoe Beach and Ski Club, which we just talked about, is one of those 4. And The linkage here is that the management company for Tahoe Beach and Ski Club is now working with Dick Drexler's folks at the Plaza Resort Club to work out the potential exchanges if owners want to swap their timeshares. In the research that I have looked at on shutdowns and wind downs of timeshares, I have not found many creative instances where people were able to swap timeshare A for timeshare B and maintain ownership. But that's what they've come up with at the Plaza Resort Club, and very recently Drexler consulted with his investor group and discovered that they would be willing to even allow some of the timeshare owners to maintain their ownership through this process while the overall resort is, refurbished for hotel use. So it may turn out that they have three solutions. Many owners walk away without any more financial commitment. Some exchange their timeshares for similar timeshares at nearby resorts. And a third group just stays put at the Plaza Resort and uses it for a few more years as a timeshare while it becomes a hotel.
So why I see these as positive outcomes, because you have proactive boards evaluating the situation, taking action, mobilizing their owners, and coming up with a result that is most beneficial for the resort and the owners. Now, on the flip side are negative outcomes, and I'm going to talk a little bit more in a general context about that, but my concern is that when boards fail to take action and do not implement changes, they may find themselves in a dire situation financially, and I believe that we see coming down the road the potential of HOAs filing bankruptcy or going into default. And is that something you see as a real possibility on the horizon?
Well, I think it's a distinct possibility for many resorts that are older and not in prime time or in prime season year-round. We ran into at least a half a dozen resorts at the TBMA meeting that are in serious financial straits. They don't have reserves to refurbish. The kitchens are 30 years old. They're not in a position to snap their fingers and suddenly pass a special assessment. And the boards have been sort of eking out an existence for years, hoping that something bad didn't happen. And I think those resorts are, I wouldn't want to overstate the case, but I think they're already 1 foot in the grave of, timeshare hell, because I don't see how they can resurrect 30 years of sort of inattention with 2 or 3 years of excited hyper activity. And the reason is because the owners at all these older resorts have gotten used to the way things are. Some are apathetic. They don't do anything but use the resort or maybe not use it. And they're not going to become politically obsessed with saving a resort overnight because they just haven't been paid attention to often enough to be in the loop. The resorts that I have seen that have a good prospect rather than a negative one are the resorts in nice areas that are still attractive for travelers, and resorts that have maintained their physical plant so that they're not a dump, and there's many that are dumps. But you need that ongoing activity. You can't just go to one homeowners meeting and say, gee whiz, we have to wake up tomorrow. It really requires some ongoing diligence by the board members. And at the TBMA meetings I've attended, I've seen the good, bad, and the ugly on those, where some boards are actively looking at bankruptcy as an option or just getting a wind down to close up shop, or they're looking for buyers. And those are very sad, unfortunate, emotional burdens for all the people involved, and particularly the owners who just see the end of a dream coming in their mailbox. But I think there's lots of hope for resorts in good areas with capable, responsible, and active management. And certainly much of the feedback I saw at TBMA was a sense of optimism from the boards that thought, hey, I think we can do this. But it takes action.
Now, another negative outcome can result from the sunset provisions that are looming in the not-too-distant future. And some resorts are implementing plans to deal with that situation. They recognize the fact that they have to possibly get a vote of the majority of their owners, and they're looking at the future of what will happen when these sunset provisions start to kick in. And there are situations where the sunset provisions have already kicked in, and most of the resorts have been able to vote for the continuation of the timeshare regime. But when you have a board that may not be proactive, chaos can happen. So chaos can happen through inaction with resorts that are not taking care of their responsibilities in terms of recognizing the problems and trying to work towards a shutdown of the resort or repurposing of the resort. That can result in chaos, and not acting on these sunset provisions creates a whole nother potential set of circumstances that could wreak havoc on the resort. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Well, sunset provisions are like probably the worst nightmare for an HOA board member, because they never thought of it or heard of it when they bought their timeshare, and it sounds sort of arcane. The bottom line, in almost every timeshare document that owners receive when they buy, there's a statement somewhere, probably near the very end of their ownership documents, that say this plan will come to an end in such a date. And a lot of them are on the verge of seeing that happen in 2020. For some reason, there's a lot of resorts I'm aware of that were formed around 1980, and they're ready to close by 2020. And that may sound like it's far off for some folks, but for most of these timeshares, when you have a lot of title cloud problems on the intervals you own, it may take you several years to unwind and clarify the title. I know at the Plaza Resort in Reno, they found out that they had 6,000 weeks, but they had 30,000 different deeds out there. And that's why they had to spend so much money to clear up the title. You can't really shut down a resort if you can't sell the property to somebody else. That's why title is important. And you have to have a buyer, and no one's going to buy a property that's sort of got sullied titles. So there's just a lot of details to the wind down or sunset part of it. And if the board doesn't take action to either extend a timeshare plan or plan an orderly transition to shut down the resort, if you reach that magical moment in 2020 where the resort HOA ceases to exist, suddenly all the owners are tenants in common. They all own the timeshare equally, but there's no management structure, and there's no way to dispose of the property. So that's the chaos you referred to. If you do nothing, you end up with a mess that, the equivalent of a probate court's going to have to sort out, and it would be a negative for all parties. So it behooves all the boards that are looking at their sunset plans to get proper legal advice on how to either extend them or go through with the termination, get all of the owners involved. So if you need a vote of the owners to do something like extend the plan, you can do it. And in all honesty, there's some states where it's going to be harder to do that than others because the voting requirement is higher. So it is, as I said at the beginning, if you want to have a nightmare, think about sunset clauses that are not paid attention to until you're unable to really kind of address it. And fortunately, at the TBMA meeting, there's a lot of focus on that. And even though some homeowner groups might want to roll their eyes at just the mention of a sunset clause, it's a very active part of the responsibility of being a board member.
Yes, TBMA and timesharing today have definitely raised the awareness of the dangers of not taking action relative to these sunset provisions. Unfortunately, in many instances, the governing documents are not clear or are silent about that issue. So careful attention has to be paid by the boards to make sure that they are on the right track. I am happy to say that quite a few board members that I've spoken to said they have already taken action or are planning to take action. So that's really a good sign. And in following up with several attendees at the TBMA Tucson conference, I got the clear impression that they left the conference with tons of action items that were presented as part of our intense agenda. So I do believe that TBMA is fulfilling its mission of providing education, resources, and solution to those who take the time and participate. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, having been to several now, I think the potential for motivated board members is fantastic for them to get a lot of detailed information that they can use immediately just by spending a couple of days with their own colleagues and the professional experts who are panelists at the TBMA. So I think the people who are attending are getting an extreme positive service where they get more information in 2 days than they probably had in 10 years. And it's all relevant for what their responsibilities are as board members. And really, it expands their awareness of all the issues that are really out there. And when they hear about the Plaza Resort Club or Tahoe Beach and Ski or other resorts that have just been either able or totally unable to deal with their issues, it is an eye-opener that prompts a lot of smart conversation.
Jeff, I want to thank you for your participation in TBMA and for joining me on today's broadcast.
Jeff, it was all my pleasure. We'll do it again sometime.
And this concludes this TST broadcasting program on the Resort and Marketing Channel. I'd like to encourage all board members and resort managers to attend the next TBMA conference to be held in Providence, Rhode Island, May 21st through 23rd, 2017. Be sure to send your RSVP to resorts@tsttoday.com.